The winter meetings are in the books. Players have changed rosters and uniforms. Some are leaving, some are coming. We'll talk about it all on today's episode of Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. I am one of your dual co-hosts here on Locked On Guardians. I want to thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. I am Jeff Ellis. I've probably done more Rule 5 research on the Cleveland Guardians and the Rule 5 draft than anyone you have ever met, considering one of my first pieces back in the day at IBI was literally just tracking the draft and then every year adding to that database of like positional breakdown and then back then the Indians and who they had lost and the percentages. I have always had an interest in this draft. I was sitting there in an after-school teachers meeting, hitting refresh on Justin's Twitter because he was the best source I had because I couldn't listen to it. So, I want to give him a thank you and a shout out. He was fantastic during the whole thing. Justin, give him your background.
I am Justin. I'm still 6, so I'm staying off camera, so you don't have to see that. I've always had a better face for radio anyway, but I was in front of my computer for the Rule 5 draft like I have been for the last decade because I'm a giant nerd and that's what I do. I've been Rule 5 eligible myself for, 8 years, and I've still gone unselected, so still hoping one day my name gets called. My cousin once entered the NFL draft, by the way. My cousin went to Kenyon College, and then he went to somewhere after that. But he actually declared for the NFL draft, and he got a letter back from the NFL, and he actually was like in the draft one year, never got drafted. I'm like, I should do that in baseball one year, but it was always kind of funny. So I went undrafted today, so unfortunately everybody stuck with me.
No, it's a cool idea. I kind of wish I'd done that. That's an awesome letter to have the rest of your life.
Right.
Yeah. But okay, we're going to start off with the Rule 5, who's here, who's left, why they kind of made the moves they made, and why certain players got selected. After that, we'll talk about why it seems like the hose for trades was turned off until like right before we started to record, and we're also just going to talk about kind of the winter meetings in general. So make sure you're tuned in for all of that. And as anyone knows, historically, this podcast records when news happens. So if you're listening, maybe there's a chance news is going to be breaking because that has been a historical precedent on this show. Let's first start off. I think you and I both agree that I think we both expected Nic Enright to be gone. Like if they could have protected one more guy, it probably would have been him. There was so much smoke around him. He was always the guy they were most likely to lose, even though he wasn't the first player selected from Cleveland. He always felt like a surety to me.
Yeah, I mean, he is the lowest variance prospector, and relievers we've talked about over and over again. Relievers are the easiest thing that gets picked off in this draft, and the Marlins needed relievers very badly. And he was low variance. I expect Nic Enright to easily stick on that roster down there. He throws a ton of strikes, is deceptive with the fastball, and if he adds any velocity, it's going to be a huge boon for him, and he's got a big curveball. A guy who throws that many strikes and has that much success at the minor league level, despite the fact that you look at his overall stuff and you think, wow, that doesn't look like he should be having that much success. It really says something. So, yeah, that was an easy pick right there. I think the two guys that were picked were easy calls, and there was a third one I was surprised wasn't.
Yeah, for me, hot take incoming. I am happy we lost Nic Enright. And before anyone gets mad at me or anyone from the Enright family gets mad at me, I am happy we lost Nic Enright because he deserved to get picked. He deserved to get this opportunity. He was a guy who was a 19th round pick. Yeah, he's ready. He was a 19th round pick in 2015 out of the Stewart School in Richmond, Virginia. So out of high school, he was drafted, and then he doesn't get drafted again until 2019 as a senior in the 20th round. A round later, probably would have gotten more money if he had signed in 2015. Went to Virginia Tech, pitched well, and he's done everything this team's asked of him to do in the minors. this past year across double and triple A, and we love Tim Herron. You and I are both had him as the number one reliever you had to protect. Herron struggled a little with the trip up to double A. Enright, no problem. And that's not to knock Herron. It's just to point out, this is how good Enright is, how steady he was. That the place that has tripped up everyone else, Miklajak tripped up going up there. Logan Allen tripped up when he got the to AAA. Enright was water off a duck's back. His final numbers this year: 11.9 strikeout per 9, 1.9 walk per 9. He's gone. I wish him well. It's just he's gonna that Marlins team. I've been talking about them needing relief help for 2-3 years now on this show, and he's gonna easily slot in. And as a 25-year-old player who has just worked and worked and worked, good for him. I am happy for him. I am glad that he is no longer a Guardian because he's earned this, and I hope he sticks as a 20th round pick. I haven't looked it up, but they never get any money, and he's earned this opportunity. I'm excited for Nic Enright.
Yeah, great for him, and he's a guy who could have a very long career too. Guys who throw strikes the way he does as a reliever, and even if he sits in the low to mid 90s, this is a guy who probably can have a good, solid, 5, 7, maybe even a 10-year career if he continues to throw strikes the way he's proven in the minors. Those guys always find work, especially with the data on him. Everybody loves the high spin, the back spinning fastball that he has, makes him more deceptive. And who knows, maybe the Marlins have been good at developing pitching. So, obviously not as good as Cleveland, but they could find something and help him, add a tick or two of velocity, and that takes him from 90, 94 to 92, 95, 96. That's pretty big. It could be a big difference for him. So I expect him to have a pretty solid big league career. And hey, shout out to Nic Enright's mom too. She broke the news to us as Willie and I are recording other podcast the day that we were waiting for the 40-man roster decisions ahead of the Rule 5 draft being made. His mom broke the news that Tim Herron made the 40-man roster that night. So shout out to the Enright family doing all kinds of great things this year.
Yeah. No. So if perchance mom is listening, we are very happy for your son. We are sad to see him leave, but we are happy for this opportunity. The other player who has this, and by the way, thanks to new rules, if you hadn't missed over the past few years, that also means that they had to pay $100,000 to get him. So not exactly a cheap amount, not a huge amount to a baseball team, but it's something. The other player, Kevin Kelly, Enright, I mentioned, was a 20th round pick. Kevin Kelly was a 19th round pick in 2019. James Madison University, which Cleveland has had it's taken a lot of guys out of there. DJ Brown and Jake Lowry back in the day. Lowry was a relatively high pick. Of course, chased a lot of this past year. But Kevin Kelly is one of 4 James Madison players I've seen play in Cleveland's system. That being said, I think yes. So Mike
Kevin Kelly would be the first one making the big leagues.
Yeah, none of them have made it. It's I pulled it up. I don't know Billy Sample. He is far and away the most productive. Mike Venafro, I remember. Ryan Reed, Travis Harper, Larry Mitchell. I don't know any of these guys. Are the other ones who have made it. So good for Kevin Kelly. Hopefully he gets to big leagues. If he can get .3 WAR, he will be the 3rd best player in James Madison University history. So he's got a relatively low, and he's got a chance at it. And what was kind of fascinating, I think, with him, I'll let you talk about an interesting pitch mix. He was also a name that was popping up late as we talked about this. I think we started kind of focused on Miklajak and Enright, but Kelly's name was coming up more and more. I think through the process, people liked him, but I think the most fascinating thing is Tampa with a packed 40-man traded for him. They could have waited and signed him, but they were afraid he wouldn't get there. So they traded to get him. They went out of their way, made room, and think that he can stick on their roster. That says a lot. So, your thoughts on Kevin Kelly, the first Guardian loss today?
Yeah, I want to pick above Nic Enright. So it was back-to-back Guardians in the Rule 5 draft. Colorado took him, and then obviously that trade was worked out. But when if you're not familiar, when trades are made in the Rule 5, so Colorado picked him and traded in Tampa Bay. When that happens, that trade is almost always agreed upon prior to the draft. They always have the teams talk, and they always say, okay, if this guy's there, we'll take him and trade him to you, and here's what we want in return. Because Colorado wasn't going to use their pick. And you're right, Tampa Bay went out and they traded Brooks Raley today, and they grabbed a guy and make room. They got a guy who's not eligible to be added to the Rule 5. It doesn't have to be added to the Rule 5 or the 40-man roster until 2024, who also is an interesting prospect in his own right. But yeah, they went out and made room to add Kevin Kelly today, so they really liked him. We should have known. Honestly, this is exactly like Ryan Thompson for them all over again. He's got a very low release point. It's very unique. He only throws. Same with Enright. He doesn't have a lot of velocity. It's like 90-94, but because of the release point, it's just the overall spin on it. It runs in on right-handers. It's really hard. It can run away from left-handers, but it gets a lot of ground balls. The slider kind of pairs off that really well. I don't want to say he tunnels them, but it's you see the fastball coming in from that angle, and you see the slider coming in at that angle. It's very similar and runs away from right-handers. I don't know how he's going to do against left-handers, to be honest. And his control, you talked about some of the guys that struggled from the jump from AA to AAA this year. Kevin Kelly did struggle moving from AA to AAA. If you look at the numbers, typically a guy who's always thrown strikes, but had a little hiccup when he went to AAA to throw strikes. But he should be fine, and we'll see how he handles left-handers. But he'll be able to get right-handers out without a problem. He gets a lot of ground balls. None of his stuff is great, but it's one of those unique, unicorn-type release points that Tampa Bay loves. So I won't be surprised at all to see him make it 90 days on that roster either.
He's also you can excuse me, you can take your bingo card and cross off former Cape Cod All-Star in terms of player they drafted and developed. We know they love the Cape. I spent my entire planning period today going over Cape data for this year. So keep that in the back pocket just in case.
Yep.
When we got some time to chatter about that. But we're going to take our first break here. We're going to come back. We got one more Guardian who we're saying, and this is the player that we're going to discuss next is gone for good. Like these other two might come back, but the next player we're talking about is so long, Auf Wiedersehen, good night. But first, we're going to take a quick sponsor break, come back, and then you also get a chance to learn about the players the Guardians took, one that I find especially interesting on today's Locked On Guardians. But first, let's talk about our good friends over at the Bet Online. Now, listen, Bet Online got into the hype just like we all did. I know they had the Giants as the favorite to land Aaron Judge. That did not happen today. That kind of set off everything with the winter meetings. But you could have made some money if you thought that at the end of the day he was going to go home. You would be some dollars richer if you got into Bet Online, your number one source for sports betting, info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all. And if you love sports podcasts, they're on Bet Online as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online. That's where the games start. Keep heading to Bet Online. I'm sure now the Judge is out, we'll have maybe some Rondon odds. Trying to think of the other big, the shortstops. Of course, that is where we'll see the odds. Correa, Bogarts, the rest, Swanson. Go check that out with our friends over at Bet Online today.
Well, Jeff, they did update their MLB World Series odds today. Do you want to guess where Cleveland falls on their newly updated MLB World Series odds?
Are they still tied with No, I bet they're below Boston, depending on when that update happened.
Oh, you're so close, Jeff. You're so close.
They're actually ahead of Boston? No, I don't have a guess.
They're tied.
Okay,
the Red Sox, the Guardians, and the Brewers are both 33-1 odds in the latest update. That is up from 50-1 odds. Their last update back on November 6th. So
I would not take the Brewers in that mix. I thought Boston, after adding the player from Japan whose name I'm blanking on, and Kenley Jansen. Jansen's a little overrated right now, in my opinion. I thought they'd be moving up, but let's talk Eli Lingos. Another, we had a 20th and a 19th rounder. Lingos was a 22nd rounder. I want to say at Arizona. Was it Arizona State? Wasn't he
Ooh, you're challenging me on this one.
And 22nd rounder, I believe that's the Tim Herron round. So that Tim Herron might be the last. Yeah, he's the last one standing. Lingos was a pitchability guy. You could throw him up and down the line. He was a lefty. He was a solid left-hander in the system. He could plug in at any spot and go. I don't know the likelihood of him making it to the big leagues ever, but you need Lingoses in your minor league system.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, good for Eli, because a year ago, and it was, I believe, the 2021 season, he was knocked out early in the year. He took a line draw off his head, and he was out the rest of the year after that happened. So he came back in the 2022 100% healthy and had a pretty nice year. He started and relieved, mostly relieved this year. Only started 3 games between AAA and AA, but yeah, he was one of those guys that was a swing man and filled in whenever they needed it. Like you said, he'll go down with the Tanner Tullys and the Justin Garzas and the Kirk McCartys, guys that you absolutely need in your organization. And I hope for his sake he makes it to the major leagues, but feel good for him. At least the fact that he made it back this year, and another organization might have more innings and more space for him than Cleveland did. So who knows? Maybe it works for him in Colorado. I don't know how. He was I think if I remember right, he was a fastball curveball guy with that weird.
I believe so.
Turning, he kind of turns his back to the hitter when he throws. It's very funky. But I think he relies on a curveball. So I don't know how that'll play in the elevation, but hey, good luck to him. And he made it back this year after that injury, and hope he has more run in Colorado than he did in Cleveland in the system.
Yeah, and this, I think we should point out too. It's like they've had quite a few players, like from the minor league level. So they kind of also, by losing 3 of their minor league guys today, and then just guys like Tanner Tully, who moves on to get other opportunities, and Kurt McCarty, who went to Korea, I believe. So they needed some reinforcements, and they lost 3 players today and replaced them with 3 more. I think they just wanted to get some upper level players at some positions they're weak at. They started with Bradley Hanner, who was a 21st round pick. We're staying in the 20s. Fastball slider type, reliever all the way, small school guy, but he was their first selection. I didn't have too much on him other than being like, fastball slider, and that he can slot into a relief role, probably start the year in AA for Cleveland, but helps with the fact that, they just lost 2 relievers who would have slotted into the upper minors. Gives them, you need guys who you can feel comfortable putting out there in that role.
Yeah. Captain's broadcaster, John Vicari, did drop me this interesting note on Hanner. Said that the Captains only had 9 triples at home in 2022, and 2 of them were against Hanner at Classic Park. So 2 of the 9 triples they hit at home were off of Bradley Hanner. So he won't be giving up triples at Classic Park this year coming up. I don't know what that really says about him, but Dynamite, it's one of those weird drop-ins.
Yeah, he was the minor league relief pitcher of the month for the Twins for May. He's a depth arm. It's that's what he's there for. But again, they needed some more depth arms when you're talking about the guys they lost today, and then some of the players who you can't, like Tanner Tully, I think eventually comes back as a coach, but listen, if you're in the upper levels of the system, it's kind of like death because they have so much depth, right? Like they lost 2 interesting relievers who couldn't cut their 40-man, who teams think can make their 25-man roster. So there's reasons why guys are moving on. Next up, it's like, no, I didn't close it, was Michael Berglund, who, again, if you scout a stat line, he's a 16th round pick. The Guardians like those guys who are maybe so patient that they're passive. And, he's been an A-ball since 2018. Like he got out for 2 games this year, but for the last, I know he didn't play in 2020, and he didn't play either in 2019. I'm sure it was an injury, but 21, 22, and 2018 A-ball for Berglund. This team needed catching depth though, and he's got an arm, right?
Yeah, the video I found on him goes way back to his college days, which was at Texas Tech. The video I saw, definitely good pop time and more than enough arm strength to be a good catch and throw kind of backstop, which is good, what they needed back there. Yeah, they have a type for catchers. They like catchers that are patient at the plate and will draw walks, even if it's sometimes them taking a called third strike, and then they have a big arm. That's their type. Patience and big arm, and everything else, is gravy, I guess. So he'll probably go to Double-A this year.
I assume everyone
I don't know.
they take is starting the year in Double-A, right? Don't they have to start the year in the upper minors?
They may have to, yeah. But I would assume he's more than ready for Double-A at this point. Like you said, he's been an A-ball for 4 years, so they really don't have a catcher to go to Double-A this year. Really, like truthfully, there's nobody. So he might even get the bulk of the starts this year, for all I know, because they shuttled Seth Cadell and other random guys that they signed as non-drafted free agents up and down all year to catch until Brian Lavastida went back to Double-A.
No, it'll be interesting to see how they handle the catchers. It's like the catching system is so bad in system. Lavastida is interesting.
I mean, if you honestly, like, I'm still doing top 10 by position. I'm still trying to figure out my list for that in the organization. Like, there are some international catchers that have a lot of upside and people are interested in. But if you eliminate those 17-year-olds and from the Dominican right now, Berglund might be their third or fourth best catching prospect, depending on how you feel about their interest in Logan Clark, since they drafted him and signed him away from a college commitment. So,
yeah, it's gonna be, like I said, they need the depth there. And then Justin Lewis stood out to me because he is a guy that I knew from his Kentucky days. He is a guy who's been a interesting player for a very long time, and he's long, he's big, he's athletic. I found my tweet from him back in 2018 where he was a 12th round pick. The thing for him was he was always he was a draft eligible sophomore. So then his junior year, he was a senior age junior, and that kind of affected him. But in 2017 and 2018, like 2017 in particular, he had some like day one run before that draft began, in terms of like fall ball and some of the feelings people had. They liked the athleticism and the size. And unfortunately, he did not have a great 2017, but he was like a legitimate day one prospect. So he is, 27 now. He has always been home run prone. The Guardians don't have an issue with home run prone pitchers, though. If you listen to the show, we've talked about they prefer fly ball to ground ball pitchers. This year, he moved up to AAA. His strikeout rate dropped. His walks haven't been great, but I will also take a moment and point out Arizona hasn't developed anyone. Like, they've spent some high picks on arms, but I think their entire pitching staff is outside. They're hoping that guys like Nelson, they have some interesting young pitchers to finally be the guys for them. But even their relievers, like Joe Mantiply, didn't start with them. He's bounced around a few places. They have not, Kyle Nelson was one of their top relievers. They also have Cole Solster. They're building a former Guardians bullpen, but their internal development, these young kids, they're hoping those will be the ones. So, adding a Lewis to Cleveland with the profile, with the pitch mix, there's a lot of reasons to kind of think, wow, this is an interesting selection.
Yeah, I saw a quick video on him out on just going through the archives, and he does have an interesting changeup and did have a decent breaking ball. It looks like the changeup looks like it's probably his best pitch, and I don't know how hard he throws these days. I haven't had a chance to look at that, but strike throwing sure not one of his benefits, but he's very tall and very long, and it looked to me like he kind of cuts himself off from having more extension despite having long arms. So we'll see if Cleveland can fix that. I don't know. This is the second pitcher that Cleveland has picked up from Arizona this offseason. First Ross Carver and now Justin Lewis. So maybe it's one of those situations where, like, the guys they drafted from Florida, they saw they weren't being developed. They saw the upside, and thought they could develop what Florida was not. Maybe they see the same thing from these guys in Arizona because,
I mean, and they're merciless when they do see things like that. Like when they would
Right.
just target everyone Cincinnati was releasing, because it's like Jake Paulson is the one that always comes to mind, but there are some other guys, or with the Angels back in the day. I mean, they would just it was like a dog with meat. But yeah, I think he's even though he's the third selection, so to the Guardians, he's clearly not the guy, or they would have taken him higher. He's the one who stood out just in terms of like, man, like that's a guy I know. Like that is a guy who has been on the radar forever.
So real quick, are you surprised that any of the guys we talked about didn't get picked? So Nick Mikolajek, Peyton Battenfield, Gabriel Rodriguez, those are probably the only real, and Andrew Misiazek too, I was surprised by, I would say. But are you especially surprised any of those guys didn't go? I would say Misiazek, I was surprised it didn't go, and I'm kind of surprised. I guess I'm not surprised Mikolajek didn't go. I guess it just says that anybody who might have scouted him didn't think that he was worth trying to fix at the big league level this year from whatever issues he had a year ago.
Which is crazy because like 2 years ago, he was a borderline top 10 for some people. I get that. I think Misiazek was one. I thought for sure, like just because lefties, but I think there might be people who think he's more of a loogie, and that just doesn't exist anymore. Gabby Rodriguez, we talked about, like I don't know who has all the offsite data though. Like Cleveland's pretty protective with their offsite data, so that could be one of the things. And then of course, the big shock of no Ethan Hankins being selected.
Yes, I fell out of my chair when the Rule 5 draft ended and his name didn't get called. Everybody who kept tweeting at me saying they should have kept room for him. They should have kept room for him.
Yeah,
nothing,
I mean,
that's nothing personal against him. That's just saying
against him. It's just
never gonna happen.
It was a combination of us getting constantly hammered with like questions about him, as well as some bad / lazy reporting that like included him on like most likely lists just because he had been like a name. And it's like, he's had some work to do and he's had some injury issues, and he's not close. He's not close. And that's it's more of us.
You can't stash that.
Yeah. And it's like I said, it's nothing against Hankins when I make these jokes. It's more that like I'm sitting here and smirking and saying it because like we have had to deal with so much Hankins statements that it's like it became an internal joke between the two of us. Like it literally is just, and it's not that he is a joke. It's that the over asking and the overuse,
the over reporting or suggesting. Yeah.
Yes. So I think Misiazek and then Gabby Rodriguez were probably the most surprising to me. And what a fall for Mikolajek, who I thought like last year might get to the big leagues just because they could use bullpen help, and then didn't so much occur. Let's take our next break in the action here, listen to some fantastic sponsors, and we're going to talk a little bit about the meetings in general on today's Locked On Guardians. But first, a quick word from some fantastic sponsors. And that was a very quick word from some fantastic sponsors. So I'm going to take a second. I had some people get mad at me when I said we have to be patient on trades. And I just want to point out, and this isn't even a pat myself on the back, this is just kind of basic logic. Any bigger trade typically is going to have some lesser pieces in it. And what we've seen is essentially after the Wong trade on Friday, or the Winker trade, depending on how you want to look at it, there hasn't been a trade until this evening. And that's what I was talking about. And it was Joe Jimenez. Oh, that's an interesting one. I kind of like Jake Mangum. That's a good and there we go. Like that's since he didn't get taken in the Rule 5, Jake Mangum is the player to be named later in the deal that sent Hernandez and Brigham to the Mets. He'll be an interesting center field choice for Florida. He's got no power at all, but that's an interesting. Sorry, I went there to pull up the trade for Jimenez, where they got Jake Higginbottom and Justin Henry Mallory, Malloy. I'm sorry, Justin Henry Mallory sounds like a butler, but specifically, like you look at someone like Higginbotham, a Georgia kid, another one of those Georgia kids in Atlanta system, but he got traded out. He's a left-handed pitcher who was drafted in 2018. So it's like that trade for Joe Jimenez had to wait till after the Rule 5 draft to be completed. That's why some of these trades aren't happening. It's like they had to make sure he was still available. And then it's like, okay, now everything's in the books. We'll go make that trade. Because like, let's say Nic Enright gets through the draft. Like we knew he wasn't going to, but if he had, he is so much more valuable as a guy you don't have to add immediately to your 40 man. Right. You can have start the year in the minors, and it's just you got to call him up by the end of the year because if he pitches well again, and like if you're a team like the Marlins or whatever, I mean, even if you're Oakland, let's say, you're going to call him up before the end of the year anyways. But it gives you more flexibility and more time to make some decisions. You know, guys are going to get hurt. It's going to allow you to kind of mess with roster spots. That is why trades were essentially on pause. Free agents happen, but during the winter meetings, you might be surprised. You think everyone's together, should be easy to make trades. Till that Rule 5 draft was over, and we got Chad Smith for Jeff Criswell. That's a weird trade in my opinion, and a very minor one. We got the Brooks Raley trade, which was to clear a spot on Tampa's roster. So it's essentially like they cap off trades, and you don't see them as much because this isn't the 1940s. People can do things when they're not in the same hotel room. Or hotel building, I should say. And they don't. All the GMs don't share a room, contrary to popular opinion. But things can happen. So and teams are so precious at the end of the roster anymore, and they're so invested in everything that like waiting till after the Rule 5, waiting 3 extra days is a big enough deal to hold off. That isn't to say that like tomorrow you're going to have a Sean Murphy trade. I'm questioning if Oakland has priced everyone out of him right now. We will have to see. But I just want to say like trades are kind of back on and can happen. And the Joe Jimenez deal is a classic case of that. Like, he's a rental for Atlanta. Atlanta needs some pitching depth. They traded a guy who played really well, but it was kind of old for every level he played at, and a older lefty. They traded 2 potentially useful pieces, potentially nothing pieces to get a rental piece. We'll see how it works out, but that was okay. Trades are back on now, but that is why there were no trades the past few days.
Yeah, and it also depends on the market too. Like the catching market was filled with there's a few teams that need catchers, but you've got Contreras, you have who else? Vasquez. You've got a couple of Zunino. You got a couple other guys that are hanging around.
Narvaez are kind of like your 4. Narvaez are kind of like your 4 guys, and then you got the Toronto and Oakland.
Right. So you've got a lot of catchers that are reportedly available, whether they're through trades or free agency. So that market is jammed a little bit, and you need some dominoes to fall to make things happen. And the Cardinals supposedly said they were priced out, or they didn't like the cost for Murphy at this point, and they decided to pay big money to Wilson Contreras. That's what kind of makes me tilt my head a little bit, is that the Cardinals were so just done with the cost of Murphy. They pivoted to give a big deal to Wilson Contreras, who, I don't know, we'll see how he ends up defensively, but I don't know, that they paid, that's a lot of years and a lot of big money for Wilson Contreras. I mean, I guess trading guys is still a bit of a cost too, but
I don't know, I guess you and I kind of disagree on this. It doesn't happen often, but I look at it this way, like
Contreras' agent said they were no longer going to wait, so they had to make a decision. And so the report was that St. Louis did check in one more time as they thought that the price was coming down on Murphy a little bit, and then the Contreras agents were saying that that you got to make your decision here, and they ultimately decided to go and make the free agent decision.
But the way I kind of look at it is like, some things I tweet out today. It's like Jose Quintana from 2019 to 2021 or 2018 to 2021 had a negative value, and then he still got 26 million today. And Tajon Walker, who's had 2 seasons above 2 WAR, who's had lots of injuries and problems staying healthy, is the same age as Wilson Contreras. He got a 4-year, $72 million contract. Contreras got 5 at 87.5. Where Contreras has been a 2-win player every year but 1 in his career. So it's kind of interesting that, like, I know it's 4 years, there's 5 years, but it's only about 500,000 more per year to get a top 10 player at his position as opposed to getting a number 4 starter. So I could also see a team being like, you know what, it's more valuable to use those assets to trade for pitching. Like if you're St. Louis and you want to add a pitcher, it's like, instead of giving up those assets to get Sean Murphy, it is a better use of assets to sign Contreras, who's going to give us production with the ridiculous cost of pitching. Like, okay, instead of trading Gorman here, maybe we look at Pablo Lopez. Maybe we look at
Zach Plesac.
Plesac. I mean, I'll trade Plesac for Gorman. I'm up for that. But like, I think we have seen the pitching market just get out of control to a degree.
Yeah.
And I think some of that pivot, I think I would not, I tweeted out today, I wouldn't be shocked if Sean Murphy ends up staying with Oakland. I don't know what Oakland is doing. The Diaz deal. Chad Smith is, if Chad Smith was he's not even a for sure major leaguer in my mind. Like he is kind of a quad A type that they gave up a recent second rounder that you and I both like for. Diaz was a lot of money for a guy who's been in decline for a few years. I mean, he's a useful backup, but I don't think I give that guy a 2-year, $14 million contract. Oakland doing weird things. They're having so many intentional leaks. I have no idea what's going on with that team, but it's super weird. But I get it. Like if you're Seattle, if you're St. Louis and you're just doing a cost benefit analysis, it says you sign the catcher because the asset cost should go into pitching. And that's why, like, specifically, Cleveland has even more reasons to not trade any of those big three. Like, you look at the cost of the pitching market, you look at what pitching is going for. If Oakland wanted some of those guys, I mean, I'm still okay with Valera, which supposedly he's maybe off the table. But yeah, I would not give up any of those. I mean, I'd be trying to avoid Morris and Cantillo at this point. Like, I'd be like, how can we load up? It's, it certainly seems like if you believe, and again, Zach Meisel's as good as they get. And, he mentioned he didn't mention Bybee at the time. He just mentioned no Williams, no Espino, no Valera, but certainly seems like this deal was originally based off of, and might continually be based off the idea of, in that situation, Rocchio.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm just going to say it now. As much as this team could use Sean Murphy, and I don't know what the alternatives are. If they don't, you have to certainly decide what they are. Trading Tanner Bybee for him would not be on my list of things that I would enjoy about that deal. But I think it's still, at least as we wrap this up, I still think it's a good thing that things have quieted down a little bit. Now you're not seeing all the weird puffery and leaks now that St. Louis is out and the winter meetings have concluded. But the quieter it is, the better it is for Cleveland, because Cleveland's deals almost appear out of thin air. There's usually not a lot of smoke. The day Francisco Lindor got traded, like everybody thought it was coming, but it just, it happened very fast. The Bauer deal took forever to come together. But it happened once it was out, it was out. Same with Clevenger, same with Kluber. Like there was no, hey, this is happening, or here's some speculation on this trade. No, like for a couple of years, I want to say for 2 years, I think John Morosi had the Guardians, or the then Indians, trading Corey Kluber to the Dodgers like 5 different times. Never happened. Definitely they were talking, but that just tells you right there when those sorts of things get out, the deadline or the finish line is never crossed. So I don't know. That's just how I look at it when Cleveland's attached to players in trades.
And something's going to happen. It may not be Murphy, but something is definitely going to happen. We talked about it on the show yesterday, what Zach had talked about in his piece, where like, basically you could read between the lines and say, yeah, there's a 0.0% chance Bo Naylor is starting with this team on opening day. The comments in Zach's piece today referring to Josh Bell are new statements that double down even more on it. That like, I can't remember the exact phrasing about, you can find it all over Twitter right now. But like there was some exact phrasing about like the situation will reach completion, or it was like very awkwardly phrased.
They're getting close on a resolution.
That's it. Yeah. Yes. Which means they're going to do something. So it may not be Murphy. Again, Oakland is being weird. But at the same time, if you're Oakland, you have to, like, you don't have. Laureano wasn't great last year. Montes, and that's the other question too. Like, I know we're going extra long, but hey, it's a Rule 5 draft day. We went long on the whole list being completed. Of course, we're going to go wrong here. Do they learn? Does Montas inspire any fear? Like, they held on to him for too long and it hurt them. Laureano, maybe they've held on to him too long. He didn't have a particularly great year. They don't, for a team that is all of a sudden like, we want to compete. They're not good. And it's not like they have the young emerging talent. You go, oh, this is where the next core is coming from. The next core pieces are all in the minors. Like, no one's proven yet. I mean, Seth Brown at first base is great. Like, he is maybe outside of Murphy, to me, Murphy, Laureano, Brown. That's the guys. But yeah,
it was a big drop off from Murphy to Brown, though.
Yes,
especially in terms of defensive value.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. But we'll see what happens. What I will tell you is the Guardians are going to add someone. I don't know who, but it's going to come. If it's Zunino, if it's Vasquez, I honestly don't think it'll be Vasquez based on his own statements. But if it's something like Zunino, if it's a trade, I'll be curious to see. But for the same reason, like, it's not going to be Moreno. Like, they want someone proven. Maybe it's Tucker Barnhart. I'm kidding, but he seems to be popping up on every other catching list. So might as well just mention that here. For a guy who's in good, he is in demand. Any other final closing thoughts on this longie today?
I did just see a quote pop up from Justin Hollander, who is the Mariners GM. He said he doesn't remember a time in his last 15 years where there has been this little trade activity at the winter meeting. So I think he's saying that as a sign, like, there's still a lot of moves to be made here.
No, I agree. And like I said, I think that's just the result of teams being, we talked about teams are very precious with their prospects, and everyone wanted to be as defensive as possible. And now the cap is off. So I think we'll see. And we'll hear some
look,
things
you have a big class too. Look, Aaron Judge, tons of money. Carlos Correa, tons of money. You got a lot of free agent shortstops and other guys that were going to command a lot of money on this class. So those guys usually have to fall off the board before trades happen, especially when you're talking about big money players like that.
Yeah. So, hopefully we'll have some more fun stuff to talk about tomorrow. I mean, we will, but you know what I mean. So hopefully we'll have a catcher to discuss in some way, shape, or form. But no matter what, we'll have fun things to discuss and talk about on Locked On Guardians. Thank you for tuning in, rating and reviewing, downloading. That all helps our little channel grow. I don't have the channel YouTube open right now, so I can't tell us the count. Last check, we are over 1,030. So let's keep that number climbing high. But thank you for listening, commenting below, hit the bell, all those things they tell you to do, and go Guardians, go.